Welcome to the Overcome Pornography for Good podcast, where we take a research-based, trauma-informed, and results-focused approach to quitting porn. This approach has been revolutionary and changed thousands and thousands of lives. I'm your host, Sarah Brewer. Hey everyone, welcome to our topic today. We're talking about over-desire and what to do about it. Now today we're doing another podcast live where people who are on can ask questions and I will answer them. This is a lot more fun for me. So we're going to do a couple of these. It keeps me a little bit more engaged, and I really enjoy teaching and having people actually respond to me after doing 200 episodes, just talking to myself. It's kind of fun for me to have other people there at the end of the screen. So if you don't know who I am, I'm Sarah Brewer. I am the founder and CEO of the Center for Overcoming, also the host of the Overcome Pornography for Good podcast. We have over 600 5-star reviews and have over 1.5 million downloads right now. We're also in the 0.5% global rank of podcasts, which is pretty great. You know, we've really specialized around this issue, helping people quit unwanted pornography use in a shame-free and sex-positive way. I get messages all the time of people saying, I've tried for 50 years and this is the only thing that's worked. And so we're just so glad that you're here. We're going to hop into our topic, which is over-desire and what to do about it. What I define as over-desire is going to be strong urges to view pornography tied to different patterns. And so this could be like compulsions. If you're feeling compulsions to view pornography, if you have witching hours, maybe every night at 10 p.m., every time you're in the station, I have clients who are firefighters. Every time you're in the station, it could be like a specific place. It could be a specific event. It could be a specific time. It could be a specific emotion. Every time I feel this emotion, I want to view porn. Every time I feel bored, I have a compulsion to view pornography. Now, what is this? Now, people might equate this feeling of over desire to addiction. And I want to be really careful that we don't do that. And we're going to go into depth like with that concept of addiction in a future episode. And you can read a lot more on that on our website, Center for Overcoming /research page. We have a lot on addiction there. But I want you to be careful in defining this as an addiction. What I find is that most of my listeners, this fits a lot better under the guise of a habit and not an addiction. And so I'm trying to decide how far to go into that, how deep to go into that right now. Yeah, just stick with me there. So let's just keep it that simple. And like I said, we'll go into depth in future episodes. And I already do have a lot of content on that if you want to search it up. But, avoiding some labels like addicted, and maybe like just because I'm having compulsions doesn't necessarily mean addiction. It could just mean a habit. And with that, once it's a habit, it feels a lot more doable. We have a lot more power over that typically. So why do we have over desire? Now, pornography, it gives us our brain this big rush of dopamine. Dopamine is that pleasure chemical that is essential for survival. And here in the 21st century, we have a bunch of different ways that we get huge releases of dopamine. Pornography, sugar, these things where we get these concentrated amounts of dopamine. Now, our brain is really smart. Our brain has this thing called the reward system. And what it does is it thinks of dopamine as something very important to our survival, right? So if we're warm inside, we have dopamine. Oh, that means we're not going to die in the freezing cold. If we eat some food, dopamine, thank goodness we're not going to starve. And so our brain remembers where and when we get dopamine. This lower part of our brain is the survival brain. It hasn't quite caught on to this idea that we have an abundance of these things and we don't need all this dopamine to survive. This lower part of our brain doesn't quite know that. And so it remembers when and where we get those dopamine hits, and it's going to remind us where and when we got them so that we continue to get more dopamine because it thinks that it's really important for survival. So when there are those specific times, 10 p.m. at night, and you view pornography and get this big rush of dopamine, your brain's going to remember that. And then it's going to remind you tomorrow at 10 p.m. that you get dopamine from pornography. So your brain's really smart that way. It not just remembers that you get dopamine, but it remembers where and how, and even, what time you get dopamine. So those might be why you're experiencing triggers or compulsions for specific times, events, or even emotions. Okay, we had a question that said, why am I going to pornography and not just scrolling social media or overeating? Why is it that I'm immediately going to porn to escape negative emotion? And the reason for that is because you subconsciously trained your brain that that's the dopamine hit that you get. You just did it multiple times. And so your brain remembers where and when you got that. It's not because there's something wrong with you. It's not because you're more perverted or anything than other people. It's just, oh yeah, your brain remembers that's the dopamine hit that we get. So let's keep going. Let's talk about Pavlov and his dogs. Now, if you followed me for a while, you might know about Pavlov. So Pavlov was a scientist who did an experiment with his dogs where he would ring a bell and give him a treat, and ring a bell and give him a treat, and ring a bell and give him a treat over and over and over and over and over again. What this eventually did is it conditioned the dogs to, when they heard the bell, start to salivate. They didn't even need to see the treat to salivate. They heard the bell and they knew there was a treat coming, and they started to salivate and bark and want the treat, want the treat, want the treat. I also like to share the example of The Office. If any of you are millennials or older like me, and we are obsessed with The Office, the episode where Jim trains Dwight to salivate and want a mint every time he dings his computer. So Jim sits across from Dwight in the office. He dings his computer and offers Dwight a mint. Dings his computer, offers Dwight a mint. Dings his computer, offers Dwight a mint, and does this, for weeks. And then eventually he just dings his computer, and you watch Dwight stick out his hand. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And Dwight says, "Oh, I don't know. Oh my gosh, my mouth. It's so dry all of a sudden." Right? It's just a funny example of how Pavlov's dog's theory works. Now, one great thing that we learn about Pavlov and his dogs is not only that he was able to train his dogs to salivate at the sound of the bell, but he was able to train them not to salivate at the sound of the bell. He was able to untrain them out of that. And how he did that is he rang the bell and didn't give him a treat, rang the bell and didn't give him a treat, rang the bell and didn't give him a treat, right? Over and over and over again, where eventually the dogs, they heard this bell and they weren't salivating. I feel like I need to clarify this right now. But what I'm talking about is I am not talking about conditioning ourselves out of sexual desire or sexuality in general, or even the desire for pornography. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about these witching hours, these compulsive moments, this over desire, not normal, natural, healthy, beautiful sexuality, which just exists and we want there. So back to Pavlov, right? He rang the bell and didn't give him the treat, rang the bell and didn't give him the treat. And what this eventually did is the dogs heard the bell and then they didn't salivate at the sound of the bell. What Pavlov needed to do here is he needed to actually ring the bell and not give them the reward. This would not have worked if Pavlov just took the bell away for a couple of years. He took the bell away for a couple of years and then they heard the bell, they would probably still salivate because they hadn't gone through the process of hearing the bell and not getting the reward, hearing the bell and not deconditioning themselves from that. So this is why some of you say, well, I quit pornography and then I went on a missionary trip for 2 years and I didn't have any issues. But when I came back, it became a problem. This could be part of why. It's because when you were on that missionary trip, you did not have the same bells. You did not have the same triggers. And so it's not that there's something wrong with you that you went back and started viewing pornography again, or even started having more compulsions and triggers again. It's just that we might need to go through this process of listening to that bell and not getting the reward. Okay. We're going to go into depth in this in our next episode on how exactly to do that. Because what would not work with this is, let's say Pavlov ring the bells and then the dogs cover their ears and they go, la, 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 la. I'm not listening. I'm not listening. I'm not listening. Right. That doesn't work. What they had to do is actually feel the discomfort of the urge, feel the discomfort of the desire for that treat, and then not get the reward. And so that's why mindfulness is such an important part of this process of overcoming pornography, is because mindfulness is that space where we allow ourselves to listen to, experience the urge, experience the compulsion, and not give into it without using willpower. Without using willpower, that's a whole thing that we'll go into in the next episode, but I want to start just opening up your mind to it right now. Okay. So, application right now is just start to identify your bells and your triggers. Practice letting yourself sit with those bells and triggers without giving in, and avoiding the bells and avoiding the triggers, right? Running away from them. This concept gives you a lot of hope too, because now not only to quit porn do we just need to have a bunch of filters on our phone, filters on our desktop, on our laptop. We don't need to throw away our internet, throw away our TV. We don't have to just deal with this forever. We can learn to have really deep self-trust and healing and healed over desire, where it's not just something we're thinking about and stressed about all the time. This is how we do that. This is how we do that, is going through this process, bringing down over desire, and then all the other healing work we're going to do on top of that, healing the buffering, healing the shame, creating a really beautiful relationship with yourself. But for now, I just want to leave it there. Just that this idea, can really gives tons of people hope that this isn't just something that you have to deal with forever. And if Pavlov could do it with his dogs, if all these clients of Sarah's could do it, then maybe I can too. I have a lot of stories of people who have been able to do this that you can go read about on my website. One that comes to mind that I like to share is I had a client who was a pharmacist, and he heard this idea and he wanted to try it out, see if it really worked. And after working, for a couple months, that's what he said about it. He said, it works. And it's true. You were not born with this over desire to view pornography. That means that you can work your way out of it. And then he talked about how he was able to sit at home alone while his wife was out of town and not have any compulsions and urges like he used to, and how amazing that was, how he hadn't experienced anything like that, any success like that in his life. And so it's a process, and it can be kind of difficult going through that process of, think about the dogs. They hear that bell and they're salivating and they want a treat and they want it so bad. And they have to go through that a lot of times, but eventually they do condition themselves out of that, response with those bells, with those triggers. Okay. All right, you guys, questions. Since other programs have recommended that I use the rubber band technique, do you recommend using this technique to manage my urges to watch porn? I don't know what the rubber band technique is. If you want to put that here in the comment, I'll give you my 2 cents on it, but I haven't heard that before. Someone else says, I remember this. Good stuff. All right, you guys, thank you so much for being here. This is so fun for me. Would love to have you come and join us in the program if you'd like more professional help around this. Also would love to have you come and download the podcast roadmap for free if you want that. centerforovercoming.com/podcast roadmap gives you the most important podcast episodes for you to listen to. With over 200, there's a lot, can be overwhelming. And then what I would really recommend though is going and watching our free class. It's an hour and 10 minutes, and it takes all of this, it condenses it, all the things you need to know, condenses it into how do I overcome pornography for good with a shame-free, sex-positive lens? How do I really start to feel in control again? And you can go centerforovercoming.com/masterclass and watch that for free. That's what I really recommend if you really just kind of limit on time and you just want to get to the bottom of it. And if you're like in the biggest hurry, okay, well, I don't want to just pitter around anymore, I'm ready to go. That's what I recommend. All right, you guys, thank you so much for being here. This was so fun. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye. I want to invite you to come and listen to my free class, How to Overcome Pornography for Good Without Using Willpower. We talk about how to stop giving into urges without pure willpower or relying on phone filters so that you can actually stop wanting pornography. We talk about how to stop giving up after a few weeks or months, and spoiler alert, the answer isn't have more willpower. And then lastly, we talk about how to make a life without porn easily sustainable and permanent. If you're trying to quit porn, this class is a game changer. So you can go and sign up at sarahbrewer.com/masterclass, and it is totally free.